and those kinds of things, and that's not as.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. We'll start with a check of the top headlines this hour. Trump says Venezuela will turn over 50 million barrels of oil. U.S. crude futures fell 1.3% to $56.39 per barrel after the announcement. White House says the U.S. discussed a range of options to acquire Greenland, including the use of military. Trump says he has a good relationship with Indian Prime Minister Modi, but he highlighted Modi's displeasure over 50% U.S. tariffs on Indian linked to Russian oil purchases. He wants tariffs could rise further if India doesn't address Washington's concerns. South Korean President Lee asked China's Xi Jinping to help freeze North Korea's nuclear program in exchange for compensation, urging Chinese mediation, while Xi urged Seoul to show patience amid strained inter-Korean ties. At least 36 people, including protesters and security forces, have died in Iran's anti-government protests over economic hardship. Unrest has spread to 27 provinces, with thousands injured or arrested, hospitals raided, and clashes continuing despite warnings. A Saudi-led coalition says that it had undertaken limited preemptive strikes in Yemen to stop UAE-backed secessionists from escalating the conflict. China is reviewing Meta's $2 billion purchase of AI firm Manos over possible technology export control issues, a move that could give Beijing leverage over the deal. NVIDIA's CEO confirms that China won't make any formal announcement about approving imports of NVIDIA's H200 chips. Right, Rosa, let's now bring you some news from the Middle East. Now, the Saudi-led coalition says it carried out limited preemptive strikes in Yemen to prevent UAE-backed separatists from expanding conflict in certain provinces. The attacks follow last month's takeover of large swaths of Yemeni territory by separatists, including much of Hadramaut province. The leader of Yemen's Southern Transitional Council, Idrus al-Zubaydi, failed to board a flight to Riyadh and fled to an unknown location, the coalition said. In response, the Saudi-backed Presidential Council dismissed him for high treason and referred him to the public prosecutor over alleged armed rebellion and abuses against civilians. Coalition airstrikes in Al-Dal province repeatedly and reportedly killed at least 4 civilians and wounded 6 others. The strikes targeted armed movements in the separatist leader's home province, adding to the death toll of an already tense southern Yemen. The coalition said it is working with the Yemeni government and local authorities to maintain security. I now request retired Major General A.K. Siraj, who is a geostrategic expert, to join us in this discussion. Thank you, General Siraj, for joining us in this conversation. General Siraj joins us from New Delhi. General Siraj, what do you see the relation between the Saudi and UAE going from here? They've historically enjoyed cordial relations, but with these latest strikes, what's next?
Very correct, Kirti. You see, Saudi Arabia and UAE otherwise are friends. They both are having same type of population, Sunni Muslims, and they enjoy the best of the relation. But when it comes to Yemen, they are on the either opposite side. Now, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, it is backing the present government, and they are a coalition-led government which is backed by the Saudi Arabia. But the UAE is basically backing the separatist, which is the STC and Southern Transition Council. Now, what happened is that the STC has taken certain areas in Yemen. So now there was a peace talk going on between the STC and also the coalition which is led by Saudi Arabia, and their leader was to fly from Yemen and to Abu Dhabi. which he has not done. He has fled from there. So it seemingly looks to be that the relations are going to further deteriorate, because what was happening is whatever the situation is there today in Yemen will affect the relation between Saudi Arabia and UAE, because since they are on the opposite side in Yemen. Now this situation is very precarious. What is happening in Yemen? The inflation is very high, economy is not doing well, and also you find that the infighting is taking place. The STC was slightly taken certain areas of southern area of Yemen. Now the coalition government has managed to take some area, but the peace talks were going, and possibly the peace talks will fail because the STC leader Jubaidi has already fled. Now another problem of Yemen is, we must not forget, is the Houthi rebel. You know, certain portion of Yemen is also occupied by the Houthi rebel, which are backed by the Iran.
Yes.
And now these are the ones which are operating in Red Sea, and they are not allowing the international ships to go by in the Red Sea and then go from to the Pacific Sea through the canal and Suez Canal, because Houthi rebels are the one which actually try to strike on the Israelis and American, but now they are striking everywhere. So the problem in Yemen is multifold. One is the problem that which is occurring between a Saudi-led coalition government and STC, wherein the fighting is now increased. The talks wanted to be there, but the talks will not able to take place because the STC leader Jabadi is fled. And this is affecting the relationship between Saudi Arabia and UAE, because the STC is backed by the UAE. And now this you will find is a cause of concern, that in case Yemen is disturbed, the relationship between Saudi and UAE can again soar up. And the another issue which I told you is the Houthi rebel. They themselves are problem now. The US and Israelis want to strike on the Houthi rebels in Yemen because they are creating a problem in Red Sea. They are not allowing the international ship to use Red Sea and cross through the Suez Canal. And they are backed by the Iran, because these are the Shia militants which are backed totally by Iran. So overall, the complexity of the situation itself is very disturbing in Yemen, wherein the relationship between Saudi Arabia and UAE will further go down in case this peace talk does not take place. And to me, it looks like the peace talks are unlikely to take because the STC commander has fled from there.
Yes. So he clearly wants to avoid a dialogue. If this peace dialogue doesn't take place, what's next then?
You'll find, in case this peace talk does not take place, then you find the situation will become more complex, and you find more fighting will take place between Saudi-led coalition government and the STC, and you will find it people will suffer more. So and this will also have direct impact on the relation between Saudi Arabia and UAE, and which are soaring up. So therefore, the requirement of the day was that some peace talks can take place between STC and Saudi-led government, and that is what they were hoping. They were going to have a peace talk in Riyadh, and this was to be attended by a STC leader, basically Jubaidi, but he has now fled. So I find the situation will be very fluid, very complex, and due to this, you will find the fighting will break again between the Saudi-led coalition and also the STC, and you will find it people will suffer. You will find poverty more increasing, humanitarian assistance is required. So overall, I say that the situation is going from bad to worse, and the relationship between Saudi Arabia and UAE will be also affected by what is happening in Yemen.
All right, sure. Thanks for your opinion and perspective there, General Siraj, but I request you to stay on. Moving ahead, viewers, let's also tell you that US President Donald Trump has said that Caracas and Washington have reached a deal to export up to $2 billion worth of Venezuelan crude to the US, a flagship negotiation that would divert supplies from China while helping Venezuela avoid deeper oil production cuts. Venezuela has billions of barrels of oil loaded on tankers and in storage tanks that it has been unable to ship due to a blockade on exports imposed by Trump since December. According to sources, supplying the trapped crude to the US could initially require reallocating cargoes originally bound for China. The Asian country has been Venezuela's top buyer in the last decade, and especially since the US imposed sanctions on companies involved in oil trade with Venezuela in 2020. I want to request Dr. Sanjay Kumar to join me in the discussion here. He's a journalist from the Korea Herald and joins us from Seoul in South Korea. Thanks, Dr. Kumar, for joining me in this discussion, firstly. And my question to you, what's the risk perception for China now as far as its oil imports is concerned, and how does the dependency on crude for China now shift?
Preeti, after having these speculations that Venezuela may export of oil almost $2 billion, it is not signaling a very positive strategy for China, and China is going to see it as a setback when it comes to long-term achievement of goals that China would like to achieve, because it has to do with the debt link incentives and debt link resource diplomacy that China had been executing, and China had been planning since many years, especially to have a good influence in the Western Hemisphere and the Latin American countries. And that is why, in short run, after this is exported to US, China would also be getting some in the similar forms, because US has not mentioned about China in that thing. But overall, it should be seen as a offensive realism, where the big players, major actors of international arena are trying to maximize their strategic interest, and at the same time they are trying to minimize the influence of the rivalry, and it is very clearly visible when it comes to US-China strategic competition. So in long run, it is going to intensify the strategic competition between US and China.
All right, sure. And what particularly about the question of oil, because we know that the pipelines were most suitable for the thick crude that Venezuela imports that China uses. How is that going to be resolved now? Because that's really like an infrastructure issue, and China had invested hefty amounts, about $100 billion in Venezuela.
See, Kriti, unless Venezuela gets stabilized, especially politically, we cannot comment on the implications, current and immediate implications. But, if you ask me frankly, in this geopolitical struggle, we should say, and geopolitical competition, I think one who is going to hold the oil is going to hold the power. So you can consider in that way. And US-China strategic competition is not an example, is a shining example. So of course, it is, the world is watching that this Venezuelan crisis, we should say, it should not turn into a, like the neo-colonial form of things where, the major powers, they grab these resources and they exploit the countries which are small. So, the entire world is watching these things. So that is why I think US also would be very careful when it comes to, sending signals, because, like there are many countries in Europe also who doesn't agree with this form of actions, and that is why I think US is going to be very careful. And China, they will keep watching. They are also waiting, and they have made condemnations too, which shows that they are closely watching the things. And you never know, like in the background, they might be having some strategies with their like-minded partners.
Sure. Well, thanks for now, Dr. Kumar, for joining this discussion, but do stay on once again with us. Viewers, let's also tell you that US President Donald Trump has reiterated his good relationship with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as he highlighted Modi's displeasure with the steep tariffs imposed on India for buying Russian oil. The tariffs are totaling of 50%, which were imposed due to India's significant purchases of Russian oil. which the US sees as supporting Russia's economy amid the Ukraine conflict. Now, Trump's remarks comes after he warned that US could further raise tariffs on Indian goods if India does not address US concerns over Russian oil imports. Let's listen in.
That's the good news. But why should they wait 3-4 years to get a plane? They should build them, get them immediately. The F-35s, it takes too long to get them. The Apache helicopter. I mean, I had India coming to me, sir, I've been waiting 5 years. We're changing it. We're changing it. India ordered 68 Apaches, and Prime Minister Modi came to see me. Sir, may I see you, please? Yes. I have a very good relationship with him. He's not that happy with me because, you know, they're paying a lot of tariffs now because they're not doing the oil, but they are. They've now reduced it very substantially, as you know, from Russia. We're getting rich because of tariffs, by the way. I hope everyone understands that.
All right, I request Retired Major General Savaj to join me back in the discussion here. General Savaj, I hope you were able to hear that statement of Donald Trump in context to Prime Minister Modi. That, of course, was a very a tone with a lot of superiority complex there. But, you know, now when US has some excess oil after its access to Venezuelan oil, and Canada also exports oil to the US, and US itself is exporting in surplus. It has a lot of oil that will now have to be deployed, which means that the prices of crude is definitely going to fall down. In that event, do you see India in a position to shift buying cheaper oil from Russia to the West?
Kriti, one thing is very clear. That as on today, there is a 50% tariff which have been put by US on India, and it is hurting Indian export. There is no doubt. You remember that as far as India and US is concerned, in fact, US is the biggest trade partner of India. There is $132 billion trade, and out of that, about $95 billion it is India export. And it's only about $40 billion which we import. So the trade surplus is toward our side. Now the point is that why US has put this additional 25% tariff is basically we were purchasing a discounted rate oil from Russia. Before 2022, we were purchasing almost 1% of oil from Russia, but after Russia-Ukraine war, we have gone as much as about 42%. Because it was a discounted and it was benefiting us. But now once the US has put a 50% tariff, it is hurting our economy, because this $95 billion trade which is going there, it will be now affected by this, the textile industry, jam, jewelry, leather goods and this thing. So no doubt about it, you have to now weigh out that if you are losing something there in US, because once your things have become very costly, then they do not become competitive there. It will be, market will be taken by Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia and China. But now the question comes is India and Russia, India and USA has to sign a free trade agreement. So if you keep on purchasing oil from Russia, then US can even impose more tariff. So considering this, India has already reduced the oil import from Russia. It has now come to 30%. It is further going to come down almost about 5 to 10%. And US is aware of that, that India is now reducing purchasing of energy and oil from Russia, because that's a requirement of day. Because if you don't do it, then you will find additional tariff and free trade agreement will not be signed. Another issue. Now, another issue which US is trying to convey, since there is a trade deficit which is in favor of India, that is about $45 billion. They are putting pressure that we must purchase oil and weapons from US to make that at par. So they are saying, like what he's talking about is the attack after Apache, which it is on the pipeline. We are buying it. We are buying the Sky Striker, which is an infantry combat vehicle, MQ-930, which is a Sea Garden drones which we are buying from them. Also, we are trying to buy the oil from them. There is no doubt about. Just to balance it out, that the trade become balanced out. And second thing, we are reducing taking oil from Russia, because that is where the problem is. Because though it was a discounted rate, but US has put an additional tariff, and if we want this tariff to go, we have to reduce. And the two major companies of Russia has been already sanctioned, so you can't take that much oil from Russia. Now the point which come is, once the Venezuela oil will come. Now the point is, remember that Venezuela has oil resources about 303 billion barrel, which is 17% of the world oil resources. Now this is going to be exploited by the Americans, and their American companies once upon a time used to. And remember, in Venezuela, the oil which is there is a thicker. This needs a separate factories and to refine it, which America has to invest. But 80% of their oil as on today from Venezuela was going to China. Now the things will change, equation will change completely, and let's see how things build up. But all said and done, as far as India is concerned, we have to understand that we cannot have a relationship which is at present. 50% tariff is hurting India. That's what Donald Trump said. Of course, India is not happy, and especially by having 50% tariff, your export is become non-competitive, and you are losing out that $90 billion. You have to either search for alternate market, which is very, very difficult. So I suppose India has already made up its mind, reduce the oil trade with Russia, reduce it considerably, come only to 5 to 10% of energy from Russia, increase it from US, also buy some weapon system, so that very soon we should have free trade agreement, and 50% tariff has to be reduced. It must come somewhere of 19 to 20%, which is by all other countries other than India in basically the southern hemisphere. So I suppose that is what it is going to happen. And let's be realistic. Both sides have to also weigh what is good for your national interest. I think for our national interest earlier, it was to get the energy at a cheaper rate from Russia. But now the requirement of day is, considering that we want this tariff to be reduced, we are now reducing taking oil from Russia, purchasing more from US, also buying some weapons from US to balance it out, so that we can sign a free trade agreement which is fair, objective, and also mutually beneficial to both the countries.
All right. Thank you very much then for your insights, General Savach, and for joining me in this discussion. And now moving ahead, viewers, South Korea's president has called on China to step in on the North Korea's nuclear program. President Lee Jae-myung says he urged Chinese leader Xi Jinping to play a mediating role, warning that all channels with Pyongyang are now blocked. Speaking in Shanghai, Lee said he proposed a freeze of North Korea's nuclear activities in exchange for compensation. That would mean no new nuclear weapons, no export of nuclear material, and no further development of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Xi Jinping, in response, urged South Korea to show patience with the North, citing sharply frayed inter-Korean ties. Lee said the long-term goal remains a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. I request Dr. Kumar to join me in this discussion with his comments. How do you foresee the development as far as the accumulation of nuclear arms is concerned on the Korean peninsula?
Preeti, from South Korean perspective, it is a very pragmatic calibration when it comes to talks with China, because China remains a key player when it comes to dialogues, especially with when I mention about the North Korea's engagement in dialogue. In recent years, it has been a failure. If you see, like many talks, including the six-party talks decades ago, it failed. Then the recent talks with Trump, the Trump-Kim meetings in Hanoi, Singapore, all these things, it was going well, but after this 2023, it has gone into limbo. So that dialogue is not, happening, and this is sending a very great concerns and insecurity in the national mood of South Korea. And President Lee has taken this responsibility to engage North Korea once again under its pragmatic diplomacy. So this time when President Lee has visited and met Xi, definitely his goal is not to offend North Korea indirectly or directly, but to engage North Korea through China. And that is why the tone looks softer.
Yeah.
Earlier, if you see the major goal of the South Korean policy towards North Korea was revolving around denuclearization. But this time,
Yeah.
the tone looks softer, and
Yeah.
it is about freezing the nuclear weapons.
Yeah, so
or
why
at
do you
least
think
to stop.
China has stopped from publicly stopping or urging North Korea to stop denuclearization?
See, China has not declared, and China also had been very strategic because they also don't want to, give any opportunity to the US when it comes to North Korea. Because, this area, this Northeast Asian security dynamics, South Korea and US has their own interest, and China has its own stake. Even Russia also has their stakes too. So, China is very calibrated because just recently during the victory parade, the optics was well known throughout the world. The optics were of Putin, President Xi, and of course, North Korea's Kim. So that optics also sent signals. And in any way, China doesn't want to offend North Korea also, but at the same time, they want to engage South Korea also when it comes to geoeconomics as well as the geopolitics. And there are some factors such as Taiwan and the recent signaling of China to Japan when it comes to critical minerals. So it's a it looks very calculated. The calculus is very calculated and very comprehensive, and it has sent very strong signals and made think many analysts in South Korea also, and many North Korean experts here see that maybe this can be like a move of China to engage North Korea and the US both on the table, because the talks have not been happening, and Trump would also love to meet Kim. He has shown interest. Just last year during the APEC, he was interested to meet Kim, and that time situation was different. But after this Venezuela incident, I think Kim also would be worried, and he also would be interested to somehow get engaged with the US. And in that sense, any possibility of a Trump-Kim meeting this year before the elections in US, or like during the meeting of Trump and President Xi, that time also is likely, or it can be achieved after the elections. And that is why very interesting developments are happening. Just this morning, we came to know that the acting ambassador of US to South Korea, he has been called to Washington,
Yeah.
and to look after, to revisit the Asian policy
Yeah.
in the region. So that's why many things are happening, many interesting developments are happening,
Yeah.
and in coming weeks we are going to see some concrete things.
Indeed, we'll watch out for those. But for now, thank you very much, Dr. Kumar, for joining me in this discussion. And viewers, let's tell you some news from Canada, where British Columbia is taking its business to India. Premier David Eby will lead a trade mission from January 12 to 17, promoting BC's critical minerals, sustainable forestry, clean energy and technology. Eby says the mission aims to attract investment, support good-paying jobs and reduce reliance on the US, citing ongoing tariffs that impact local workers. India, the world's largest energy consumer, offers huge opportunities for BC's clean technology and responsible mining sectors. The mission will include stops in New Delhi, Mumbai, Chandigarh and Bangalore, with meetings involving business and government leaders. This effort is part of BC's Look West strategy, which aims to double the exports to non-US markets over 10 years and strengthen BC as an economic engine.
2025 was a year of challenge and opportunity for British Columbia and for Canada. For many British Columbians, it was where we started to see some of the impacts of Donald Trump's attacks on our country here at home. But it was also the beginning and the continuation of British Columbia assuming our role in the new economy that we're building here across Canada, leading the Canadian economy to access markets other than the United States, to diversify those markets, to ensure that we're delivering the jobs for British Columbians, for families, so that we can support the homes and the healthcare and the things that British Columbians need and deserve. With that background, really excited to be here to share with you that we will be leaving shortly this week for a trade mission to India. We'll be visiting New Delhi, Chandigarh, Mumbai, and Bangalore. Minister Ravi Kailan, Minister of Jobs, will be joining me. It will be a small delegation. And what we're doing is a couple of things. First of all, recognizing that India will be the third largest economy in the world in the coming years. British Columbia is currently the largest trading partner India has in Canada, and we're looking to expand that. By expanding our trade with India, we are able to provide support to communities across the province that have been particularly impacted by Trump's tariffs, especially in the forestry sector, which is a big focus of this mission.
And let's track some tragic news now coming in from Europe, where at least 6 people have died, including 5 in France and 1 in Sarajevo in Bosnia, as heavy snow and icy conditions sweep across Europe. Hundreds of flights have been cancelled, with Paris airports limiting operations to clear runways and Amsterdam's Schiphol cancelling over 400 flights, stranding thousands. Dutch airline KLM warned of extreme delays and a shortage of de-icing fluid. Train services are also disrupted, with the Eurostar and Dutch domestic trains delayed or cancelled. Authorities across the continent are urging people to travel only if necessary, as snow and black ice continue to cause dangerous conditions. All right, and as always, let's end the bulletin with some technology news. Now, Britain and several European countries are pressuring Elon Musk's X to urgently stop a surge of non-consensual deep fake images generated by its AI chatbot Grok. Reports, including from Reuters, say users have been able to prompt Grok to create sexualized images of women and minors, sometimes referred to as a spicy mode. UK Technology Minister Liz Kendall calls the content absolutely appalling, stressing that creating or sharing AI-generated sexual imagery without consent is illegal in Britain. Regulator Ofcom has contacted X and its AI arm, XAI, to assess whether they are meeting legal duties to protect users. The European Commission has condemned the images as unlawful under the Digital Services Act, while Germany's media minister described the situation as the industrialization of sexual harassment. France has reported the issue to prosecutors, and India has demanded explanations. And that's a wrap on this edition of the World Report. But thanks for watching NewsX World. For all international news and updates.